Welcome to Grief is the New Normal. I'm Dr. Heather Taylor, a licensed psychologist and grief specialist, here to help change the conversation about grief and build community and connection while we all adjust to this new normal we are living in. This podcast is for you if you are grieving or if you are supporting someone in a season of grief. I'm glad you're here. Welcome, everyone. I am so honored to have today's guest. Joining us, we have Wendy Stern. She is the founder of the Center for Somatic Grieving. She is a yoga therapist, group facilitator, teacher trainer, and thought leader in the space of somatic grief work. Wendy, I am so excited to have you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Do you mind introducing a little bit about yourself? And I know your work was born out of your own grief experience. Can you share a bit about that journey and how it became the foundation for the Center for Somatic Grieving?
Yes, thank you. My professional life started about 25 years ago when I got into yoga therapy. And I spent about a decade in private practice. And I had the honor of witnessing the way that our emotions so powerfully manifest through our bodies. And so that was really the beginning of my own personal understanding of that, both personally as well as professionally. About 17 years ago, my life took a pretty radical turn when I lost my first child. My son Noah passed away when he was 9 months old. And that event kind of shattered my life as I knew it, as well as set me on a path, really, both personally as well as professionally, to work through my own grief and to eventually begin to kind of bring together what was helping me and things from my own personal professional background with my personal experience of loss, and it led me forward. And one of the biggest things that I found in my own journey was how important it was to have a space to feel what I was going through. And when Noah passed away, the way that we dealt with it, my husband and I, is we ended up leaving the country to really seek a culture that could help us figure out how to grieve. Or we were looking for a role model. We were looking for something because we really felt unequipped in how to deal with grief. And so we looked to other cultures, and we ended up leaving about 2 weeks after he passed away. And we set off on a pretty big kind of pilgrimage to find ourselves and to find solace and healing for what we had been through. And we went to Bali, Indonesia. We went to Thailand. We had India and a few other places on our list. And we were really seeking guidance. And what we found in these cultures is that they weren't afraid of death. They saw it as a part of life. And because of that, the people around us really leaned in towards us in our grief. They wanted to hear about Noah. They wanted to hear our story. And because of that, we began to talk about what was happening for us, which really opened the door for our healing process to begin. At the same time, we are also immersing ourselves in Buddhism and Hinduism and in meditation practices. And we found that these resources, these tools were really necessary and so vital for where we were. One other thing I'll share that happened on that journey is I got pregnant with my daughter Hannah. About a month after Noah passed away, my next blessing came into the world, and we ended up leaving our travels a bit early because I was pregnant and had morning sickness and all those things. Yeah. So when we came home was when things really got real for us, and it really led me kind of like one step in front of the other. The other thing I'll just mention is I also turned to my yoga mat when I was in my own grief process. And what I found on my yoga mat was that it was the one place that I could feel. And that also became a vital part of my own healing was learning through all the things that yoga teaches us that I needed to feel my emotions in order to heal the pain of my grief. And it's so natural and normal. When something hurts, we want to resist it. We want to move away because it hurts. We have built-in defense mechanisms, all of that. But what I found when I was in the depths of my own grief was that if I could just show up on my mat, if I could just get there, it became the container where I could feel all the feels of my grief. And that, in combination with my experience abroad, laid the foundation of what my professional path would be.
Thank you for sharing about your journey to find. I love how you said that, like we were looking for a culture to help us help navigate that. I think that's so important because here in the States, like, you're acutely aware, like we're a very grief phobic, grief illiterate society. Like we do not know how to talk about that. So I think that's so intuitive to look to places where grief is able to take up more space and to find avenues to process that in a way that made sense for you and your husband, and then to bring that back with you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. And I appreciate that you said intuitive because I think it was. And I'll just say we had like friends and family, like everybody showed up. It wasn't that people didn't show up. It's that they just didn't know what to say or what to do. There was a lot of love. There was just a lack of education. There was a lack of like understanding of talk about talk about what was happening for us. So I think it was that intuitive piece that was like, doesn't feel like we could do this here. So let's
Yeah.
go seek something.
I've worked with a number of clients who've experienced a loss, and it's like helping empower them that, okay, if you're not getting what you need here, it's okay to do something different. It's okay to go somewhere different, to experience something different, because the sadman, the experience in the society can be really stifling around our grief. And so if you need to make different rules for you, then you get to do that. So I think that was brave and so honoring to not only like your and your husband's story, but to Noah as well. In that, like, yeah, I think that's so beautiful. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Thank you.
So in that same realm of not maybe understanding, and for listeners who might not be familiar, what does it mean to approach grief from a somatic lens? How does the body hold on to grief differently than the mind?
Beautiful question. Well, my own understanding of it, and I'll say personal experience as well, is that our experiences of loss and often trauma that comes with that is very much held in our bodies. And one of the ways that I can best explain it is that when we go through such a big event, we go through a loss or a trauma, we are able to process it to whatever extent we have the capacity to at that time, right? So often we process an event in the moment and then like the rest of it gets kind of put away in our bodies. It gets stored because we only have the ability to process something like that so much at the time. Our bodies hold it. It lives in the actual cells of our bodies. It's amazing these days, all the research, especially in the realm of trauma, of how we hold and store things that are undigested. They're not fully metabolized in our bodies. And so when we're working through grief, it is important to talk about it. And I did many years of talk therapy as well. I'll just say there's a lot of value I found in talking on all the other amazing techniques out there, being held and supported and witnessed in that. And when you drop it into the body, what I've learned is that to really move the grief out, we actually need to be able to touch it, to feel it, to actually go to where it's being stored, to acknowledge it, to feel it. So then it can come up and out and be released and be integrated into our systems. Sometimes I actually think of grief as like, I use this example sometimes like my younger daughter, Layla. Okay. So one thing with my younger daughter, whenever I'm on the phone, she wants my attention, right? So when she was little, she would like pull on my sleeve and be like, Mommy, Mommy. And I'd like literally run away from her into all these different rooms to just have a space. But what I found, if I would just stop and turn towards her and say, What is it, honey? What do you need? She would tell me and then she'd go away. And sometimes I think of grief like that. Like it just simply wants to be noticed. It wants to be felt, acknowledged. And then it does shift and change. It doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. I don't think there's any way around that part. The only way through is through. But
Yeah.
when we can identify where it's being held in our bodies and connect in with the sensations and the thoughts and the feelings and emotions that are there, then it has the ability to come up and out and to free us a bit from some of the burden that grief can feel like, some of the heaviness or the weight of grief in our bodies. So a little long-winded, but that's my take on why somatics work. Like, why is that important in the grieving process?
I talk with my clients all the time about we have to find ways to metabolize it out. There's this really great book called Trauma Stewardship, and it talks about, the impact of the things we carry in our bodies, and they just stay there. And so in order to help us move through, we have to find ways to metabolize it out. So like around grief anniversaries or harder days or bigger like holiday events, making those care plans where you're able to kind of metabolize out all that excess that you're carrying, because you're going to feel your way through that day, whether it's in the care plan before or the aftercare plan after. The grief is going to try to make a way out of your body. And if we can be intentional with how we metabolize it out, it's giving it a direction to go. I always think of like Bread Week on Great British Bake Off, and he always talks about you have to score the bread to make airways for the steam to come out, or it's going to rip, and it's going to rip its way out. And so that's like with our grief, right? We have to give it avenues to come out, to metabolize that air out, or it's going to rip a way through in a way that's maybe not attractive or what we intended or when we intended.
It's certainly been true in my own journey that it wasn't until I actually came into my body, things began to move. And I want to just acknowledge that was a really scary thing to do at first. So for some of you, the idea of actually going to a yoga class or going somewhere where you're intentionally going to feel it in your body may be like the scariest thing in the world. So I want to like normalize that. That's brave work to actually step in and to feel. And that, we all get to do it at our own pace and our own time. And as we feel we have the resource, in a sense, to be able to do that. And our defense mechanisms will guide us, right? Like in some ways, we're not going to be able to feel certain things. And I think that's worth naming, is that so often in the grief process, as you know, Heather, we walk around with a sense of like kind of numbness or fog, or like there's a disconnection that we can feel, like we're kind of hovering, a little fuzzy. And I think it's such a brilliant, beautiful intelligence that our bodies hold that actually gives us like a buffer. There can be a time in the beginning where they can't feel anything. And what happens sometimes is our defense mechanisms stay online longer than maybe it's helpful. And at a certain point, that may be when coming into your body or using practices that begin to kind of gently move through those defense mechanisms to begin to feel can be really helpful.
Absolutely. I love your metaphor with your daughter about if we just turn towards it and lean into it. I talk about that often, is like, how do we lean into that lost space, not needing to fix or rescue, but just acknowledging that, oh, there's something there. There's a feeling there, a thought there, a memory there that just wants to come to light and to be remembered. And then pairing that with what you were saying about capacity. I remind clients all the time, like, time is a resource, the ability to fall apart. We don't always have that based on, maybe the business end of things, or having to go back to work, or caring for others in the family. We don't have the capacity to fall apart. And that numb buffer in the beginning can be that protective factor to wait until we do have time to fall apart, and can be intentional with when and how. Like some of my clients, they do a music playlist to like mask up on their way to work. And then they have the fall apart playlist for the way home, because they don't have to be on for anyone else for the rest of the day. And that's helpful in giving space to feel in an intentional way, because you're right, like going into our bodies is painful. Grief is not comfortable. We are a pain averse society more often than not. I think, you just, lots of really great nuggets.
Thank you. As you're talking, I think I want to share a practice, if it's okay, that you made me think of as we're talking about it. It's very much in the realm of choosing the moments to let it out, and how do we create a container for ourselves that feels safe. And this practice is great for at any phase of the grief process. But I find that people in more acute grief, when it is still really held in, or when you maybe have all those defense mechanisms online, that it can be really helpful. And the practice came to me when I was kind of right at that place where I was turning towards my yoga mat, where I was like, okay, I was finding my courage, but I was afraid to go there, because I was afraid if I opened the door a little bit, that I would like literally fall all the way down the rabbit hole and wouldn't be able to come back. I was scared of the depths to which I might go. And it was my beautiful soul cousin who said, I think you need a container. So her instructions were to me was to take a timer and to create a space in my home. And, for me, that was my yoga mat, but it could be anywhere, any place. And to basically commit to 15 minutes a day or any number is okay, but that was about right for me, where your only goal is to show up at your space and to set the timer. And in that 15 minutes, some days I would meditate, sometimes I would do yoga, some days I would cry, some days I would literally lay down on my yoga mat and throw the biggest tantrum ever and just kick and scream and like lose my mind. And because there was a timer, I knew that after 15 minutes, it's almost like a hand that would reach down into the underworld, pull me back out. And then it was time to go on with my day. And then the last piece of this practice is to always have an activity that you know in advance that you will do to kind of distract yourself. So it would be like, I'm going to cook a meal or call a friend or watch a movie or go for a walk. But there was a plan. And the idea was for 15 minutes, I would find the courage to feel what was there. And then I had like permission to shift. If I wanted to stay longer, I could. But the timer was key because it gave a beginning and an end. And that was the wisdom of my cousin, to not make it like endless or infinite. It needed the boundaries. It needed to be held. So if that resonates, I invite you to consider it. And it lets a little bit of the steam out every day. A little bit of the weight or intensity would come out. And it kind of opened the door for my own healing.
I use a grief silo, kind of like Midwest corn silos. And it's kind of like our body is that silo and our grief is the corn or the wheat or whatever is filling up within it. And to be able to intentionally, I just set the timer 15 minutes, feel whatever you need to feel, is a way to help keep your silo from overflowing. I think that's so brilliant. I use rage writing with some of my clients, and they set the timer for 10 minutes and they just write out whatever they're feeling and then close it at the end of the 10 minutes and then go and do something. And like it's reorienting to the moment. And I'm just feeling all giddy over here. It's like we do very similar things just with different lenses and different language. And I think that's incredible. Okay. So, you've spent over 2 decades as a yoga therapist. How does yoga in its truest therapeutic sense support the grieving body? And I guess what makes it more different than talk therapy or other like cognitive based approaches?
I'll say when I lost my son, like before that, I had no intention on getting into grief work. So all of it came together like it was almost like just one foot in front of the other. And what I found when I was going through my loss, that these things that I'd been trained in were like the perfect ingredients for healing my grief. And those ingredients was like meditation, teaching me how to watch and to pay attention to what I was feeling when every bit of me wanted to just check out. And what I learned through that tool of meditation and mindfulness is that I actually had to check in, even though it was painful. And the checking out was keeping me from having like one foot in the spirit world, in a sense, and then one foot on earth. And it was very ungrounding, and I felt very untethered. And that actually added more anxiety because it felt unsafe, right? And so meditation was one of the ways I actually began to track myself. It taught me how to track myself. So when I talk about yoga, like I'll speak to some of the different pieces, because meditation and mindfulness is such an important part of the practice, as well as movement, as well as breath. So that's kind of where I begin, is the ability to learn how to observe and to identify like where I was holding grief in my body. What were the sensations? And then from there to understand the emotions and to be able to lean in to feel that. With the understanding that grief isn't something to be diagnosed or treated or fixed, as I'm sure we'll probably say many times throughout our conversation, right? But meditation can support us to actually shine a light and to learn how to witness what's actually going on inside. So meditation is often where I begin. Yoga, which literally means the union of body, mind, and spirit, offers us both an individual container to feel ourselves and a collective container, because often we practice yoga with other people. And so there's this sense of like a dual container. And I think that's really important when we're talking about healing grief. Everything I know about grief work, the first step is to create safety. And safety happens when we feel held, when we feel a sense of a container. So yoga in and of itself offers us that container to feel ourselves. The science around yoga is just brilliant. The way that our breath not only helps us to regulate ourselves, our nervous systems, but our breath also invites our awareness into our bodies. So I think of our breath or breath work as like an entryway or a touchstone that helps us to drop in and to begin how to enter. Because so often we don't even know how to get into our bodies, right? It's not something that we're typically taught or maybe even born knowing. So yoga teaches us how to pay attention to our breath, how to breathe in a way we're actually going to go into our bodies. And then the physical movements. This science is so old and it's brilliant. The ways that these postures are created to bring us into different shapes, different expressions that allows us to both feel what's happening, to release, but also to like strengthen and to feel our own sense of empowerment and resilience by feeling the strength in our bodies. And it offers us a way to bring into expression things that we might not have language for. Grieving, there's not always words right away that can actually bring the expression forward. So when we have a practice that guides us through different movements and breathing practices, and we connect that with mindfulness, where we're paying attention to what we're feeling in our bodies, it's like a way for things to actually come out and to be released. And that can free up a lot of the tension. Doesn't make the grief go away, but it gives it a place to go. And it supports us in kind of being able to access our own wisdom. And I think that this is maybe one of the greatest gifts of yoga in moving through a loss, is that yoga also invites us to come into connection with our higher self. And this spiritual aspect, you don't have to be religious to be able to feel connected to a sense of your own inner wisdom. And there are so many different names. Some people will call this their higher self or the divine, or some people call it God. Some people they call it their resilience. There's so many words for this. And whatever your word is, great. And the point is, yoga invites us to connect in with that part of ourselves that can see the larger perspective, that can almost step back and to see that, wow, there's a path I'm walking. We do a lot of meaning making with grief, and we connect in with our spiritual body. I don't know why this happened, but I'm opening up to receive something. And so that part of it, that connection to spiritual self, allows us to access our own wisdom. And at the end of the day, yoga is really a tool to be able to hear the whispers of our own soul, to be able to hear our own inner guidance, which is so much more powerful than what anyone could ever tell us. Right? So if I'm doing my job right, at the end of a practice, and I invite you to connect in with the place in your body that's holding your wisdom, and to go there and to listen and to receive, that you're going to get what you need in that moment. Again, it doesn't make the grief go away, but it does help you process it and move through and have a takeaway of what you need and what will support you best at that time.
I do EMDR work. I movement desensitization reprocessing. It's a trauma modality. And something I find as I'm hearing you talk, like this is where my mind is connecting an idea around these negative beliefs we develop about ourselves. And when we're going through something acute like grief, we develop maybe a negative belief about ourselves. And so we're not connecting to our body. We're stuck, either tension in our throat or our chest or our abdomen. And those are kind of in that core, there's that activation. And so what I'm hearing in the mindfulness work that you're doing through yoga is you're helping move through those negative beliefs that we've created as a result of these traumas. And it's like, no, let's reconnect with what the actual truth is that our body's trying to tell us, whether it's I am enough or I did the best I could, or, it's these challenging the I'm unworthy or I'm not safe or what have you.
I'd love to kind of elaborate on that if I can.
Please.
What I've found is grief is illuminating. So I think it not only can put us face to face with ourselves or our own worthiness, our own sense of self-love, but it often illuminates some of the ways we're out of alignment with ourselves before the loss. That it can really, it cracks us open in a way that all of a sudden we can be in touch with the way we talk to ourselves or think about ourselves or feel about ourselves in a way that maybe was always there, but we just weren't aware of it. And so in the programs that I offer, I do a whole month on self-love and acceptance, where we unpack the themes of acceptance and forgiveness and self-love. And we work with the mantra, I am enough, to see what comes, right? We have so much overlap. And it's also how grief can support our transformation. And that's kind of the other piece we haven't gotten so into yet. And I believe that grief is a catalyst for personal growth and change because it cracks us open, because it illuminates the places where we may have self-limiting beliefs about ourselves, the ways that we may not feel that we are worthy, the ways where we struggle to accept who we are. And that when that is put in our face, it is hard and it hurts. And if we have support and with time and with the right container around us, that's when we can work through and to change some of those beliefs and to come into a more loving, compassionate relationship with ourselves. So there are these little like hidden gems in the process. And what I've found at the end of the day, my word is love, that grief can open us to love because of everything we're talking about.
I make jokes. I use dark humor a lot in my coping. And so I'm like, the whole reason I'm even here in the first, it's all my brother's fault. Like the whole reason I became a grief therapist and started the podcast, all the things, it's all his fault. So, and I think without having experienced his death and the lack of resources and support that I had when he died, it's like, that's what was the catalyst to start to figure myself out, figure my own stuff, go back to school to grow and learn and figure out how to do grief work better. I mean, maybe I would have ended up in this place, but I don't think I would. I was going to be a librarian. Like, I don't think that was the path I was on. I think it's a powerful realization knowing that grief is this catalyst, and are we brave enough to look at what it's changing and bringing up in us? And if we have the support and the time to do that, like there can be these really amazing changes and we get to know ourselves in a way that we didn't pre-loss. And of course, would you rather have our person back? Yes, absolutely. And like we get to know ourselves better because we've been to these depths of depth within us that maybe we wouldn't have been called to explore without that loss happening.
I think that, yeah, there is this truth we sit with of like, yeah, I would give back all the personal growth in the world to have my son back. And I don't get to have that. So I might as well grow. I've had an anxiety disorder since I was a teenager. And I won't say that I never feel anxious, but it was going through my loss that brought things to a head in a way where I was able to work through that and change it. There's so much healing has come from it. And I witnessed that in the people that I work with, is the growth is profound. And it's a club that you never asked to be a part of. Yet sometimes you get brought in, and you know what? It's what we do with it, I guess, that matters.
Yeah. I remember in one of the hospice trainings, there was this quote that I'm going to totally botch, but it was, they say that time heals all wounds, but it's not time that makes the difference. It's what you do with the time that makes the difference.
Yes.
And I found so much like comfort in that saying, like, oh, right, like, sure, I could just stay stuck and stagnant in my grief and let that become everything about me, or I can learn how to carry it and move through it and do something with the time that I'm given, because we aren't guaranteed more time. And so it is, what do we want to do with that? And how do we be intentional with the time we're gifted with? And yeah.
Beautifully said.
Yeah. You often talk about the power of being witnessed. Why is it so essential for grieving people to be seen in their process? And how can somatic work help create that kind of sacred space?
One of the things that I found to be profoundly healing in grief work is community-based opportunities, right? And that is all about being witnessed. Yes, that can happen one-on-one too. So that is also really important. But when we're witnessed by a group of people, and when we're witnessed in a way where there's no judgment, where there's no projection coming at you, you're purely just being witnessed, it can support you to receive, number one, validation of what you're feeling. So often, one of the biggest things in the way of our healing is that we don't feel worthy of our grief, that either someone else has it worse, or I should feel better by now. It's been this long. We have so many things run through our head that can actually unvalidate our feelings. And when it's validated externally, it then internally gives us permission to feel. And that is where the magic begins. Once we have that internal permission that we know what we feel is valid and worthy, then it can begin to metabolize and it can begin to shift it. Until then, it's easy to get stuck, to kind of have that in place of like, I shouldn't feel this, and so I'm going to try not to. And it's really quite necessary to have that permission internally. So that's one piece of it, is that witness of other people can be supportive in that way, to be seen, to be heard, and to be accepted in what we're feeling. So it is certainly important that this space is safe. And one of the things I find really important in group work is clear guidelines to keep it safe. And one of the guidelines that I really love is something that we call no-crosstalk. And what that means is, as each person shares, the facilitator who's trained in giving reflection will respond and reflect what that person has said, to validate them, to kind of reflect back their own words, to help them hear themselves. And that's the other piece. Sometimes we almost need to hear it back, to like hear ourselves and to like make sense of it. With no crosstalk, the rest of the group does not have the opportunity to respond. And what we're really doing is eliminating the room for any projection within the group. So this idea of being witnessed without judgment really works when there's a container where there's no possibility for someone else to compare their experience or offer advice. It's all well-meaning, but to be truly witnessed is really a space for someone to be seen and heard and accepted in that. The other side of it is that we learn from each other. When you're sitting in a group of people and all of a sudden you're hearing other people's experiences, and you probably thought you were crazy for feeling some of the things you did. And then you hear and you see yourself in every other person. For me, it's like the greatest feeling of like connection. And it makes me feel like, oh, this is normal. This is okay that I'm feeling this, which can take away so much of the anxiety. And it can, again, allow for healing to happen. So yeah, it is about being witnessed and seen. And it's also listening and learning from each other. So it's a learning community that grows through grieving with other people, grieving in a community setting.
I love that. So the first piece of it, it was what I kept hearing is like, by being in community with others, it helps reduce the shoulds of what we should be doing, how we should be grieving. I think of so many people I've worked with where it's like they kind of white knuckled it through that first year, where they're just, well, if I can just get through the first year of grief, then I'll be fine. Then the grief will be gone and I can, I'll be back to normal, quote unquote. When really it's like, the first year you're still kind of just numb the whole time, and the second year can even be worse because it's like, oh no, this is the new reality and my person isn't coming back and I'm in this more chronic pain state, and so that second year can almost be worse. And so I think, yeah, that external permission for internal permission to just show up however we need to show up. We can be messy. We don't have to have all the answers. We don't have to know what we need even, but just permission to feel it however it's coming up, I think is so important and essential in group work and in being in community in our grief. And it allows us to share our person so we're not the only one remembering them, which I think is important too. Anytime someone asks or remembers Garrett, I light up because it's like, oh, someone else is remembering him. It's not just me. It'll be 16 years in November of this year since he died. And it makes my day whenever anyone asks. And I've done a lot of work around my grief, and yet I still miss him. It's still part of my story. He's still part of my story
Forever. And I think that remembrance piece is more important than I even remember sometimes for myself. I'll share a few days ago on June 5th was Noah's 18th birthday. And been a little over 17 years since he died, but I did not set up my day the way I normally would. I mean, I write blogs about what to do with anniversaries, and I didn't follow any of my own rules. And when the day came, I had a busy schedule. I ended up having to cancel my day. And what I realized is that I needed him to be remembered. And I was shocked that I had such a need. In my earlier days, I would always write like a blog post, or I would publicly talk about him through my nonprofit that I was running, anything to just make sure he wasn't erased. Like I needed him to be thought of and talked about. Many, many years later, I still need that. I may not need it every day. Maybe it's his birthday and the anniversary, but I need that still. And it keeps his memory alive. And yes, of course, I could do that within, but there's something really powerful around that being shared in the collective space and having his memory be remembered there too. And I think it's one of the things in our grief phobic culture that's hard. People are scared to say their names. People are scared to talk about it because they don't want to upset you, when they don't realize that it is like the most beautiful thing in the world when I hear someone say his name or talk about it. It brings me joy rather than create pain. So I think it's just a good thing that we can remember when we're supporting others who are grieving as well, is that to ask them about their loved ones, invite them to share a memory or to tell you about who they were and what they are to you. And I think it is how we keep their memories alive, which matters very much
Yeah.
when you lost
And
someone.
thank you for sharing about Noah's 18th birthday. Like that's a big deal. So thank you for sharing that. I think when people ask about our person, they can trust that if we don't have capacity to share about them in that moment, then we'll say so. But it still means something to us for them to ask in the first place. And then it's our job to determine if we have capacity to go there or not. And so I think we're all just so afraid of talking about grief and death that we just avoid it full stop instead of allowing people to have boundaries around what they share and making space to talk about our people who aren't physically here with us anymore, but are still part of our day-to-day and our stories. Yeah. So you've trained nearly 100 mindful grieving facilitators across 9 countries. What wisdom do you hope they will carry forward, and what kind of future are you building through this work?
It's hard to boil it down, but I think the most important thing, and it's not even something that I hope for. It's like I know as I witness these beautiful teachers go through this process that they are going to hold a safe space for people to grieve and offer guidance, support, and a framework for that. And that they've done their work. So they have learned how to kind of get out of the way and to support each person to have their own authentic experience. When I started the teacher training in, I think it was 2017, it was the most beautiful thing in the world to witness these yoga teachers take this a curriculum basically and a process, but to do it in their own unique way. So it's not about doing it like me. It's about doing it in alignment with like the values and the principles of the work, but to do it with their own authentic expression. So every single teacher has their own way of teaching because it's rooted in their own embodied experience of loss. So it comes from their own experience. They teach from what they've been through and what they know. And they've also worked out a lot of the triggers, and they've worked out a lot of their own kind of shadow, so to speak, in the process, so that they're not projecting it onto the people they're supporting, so that they know their own narrative, they know their own content quite deeply, so that they can really be an open kind of container, a held container for people to grieve. And so it's been really exciting to watch it grow and to see the way that when teachers are coming from different countries, that, they have their own cultures, their own customs. So they're bringing this to their own communities in a way that makes sense for their communities. So a woman in Norway is going to have some different language or different aspects that make sense for their community. Yet the values and the belief system and the method and process is consistent. So that's been really, really fun for me. And I think it's my favorite thing to do is to train teachers, because I'm also learning and growing from every single one of them. So I get up leveled with every training that I teach because people are saying and sharing their own knowledge. It becomes a profound learning community. And I'll say this facilitator community is phenomenal because of the diversity of experiences we have, because of the different places we come from, the different ethnicities, the different languages we speak. And there's something that is so profoundly universal around loss, that we share something so real among us that there's a web of connection. And yeah, it's been beautiful to just witness, and it has a life of its own now, which is really fun for me too. And teachers are teaching teachers, and it's growing in a way that I feel very proud of.
The different voices, and that you're working to empower them to make it their own. Like, you're not just trying to make little mini replicas of you. And I am all for, like, you are a culmination of your own voice, your own experiences, and you yourself are your best tool to bring into the therapy space. So I don't want you to be me. I want you to be you. That universal linkage of grief and loss. I think that's such a beautiful thread to weave through the teacher trainings that you do.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been really fun, actually. Fun just to meet people from so many different backgrounds.
Yeah. So, if somebody listening is deep in grief and feeling disconnected from their body, tense, numb, exhausted, what would you say is a small, gentle invitation you'd offer to kind of help them start to reconnect to their body, to themselves?
Well, I would say the most immediate is your breath. And it sounds so simple, maybe too simple, but to stop and to pause and to perhaps sit or stand in a way where you feel rooted or tethered to something stable. Whether if you're sitting on a cushion, you can feel your sits bones. You're sitting in a chair, you feel your sits bones, your feet are standing. To feel tethered and to take a few breaths. And if you intentionally pay attention to an inhale and then an exhale, it will guide you into your body. It will offer that doorway. So the most immediate access we have to our bodies is through our breath. So I would say start there. And one of the breaths that I love, and I learned this in my initial yoga therapy training, which was with Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy. I have to name it because it's the foundation of so much of the work that I do. Michael Lee, the founder, is brilliant. And he was really at the cutting edge of this realm of yoga therapy, which integrates yoga and somatic psychology in such a beautiful way. And he taught me a falling out breath. Maybe y'all want to do it with me. It's a deep breath in through your nose and exhale out your mouth with a sigh. And so this breath, it's just such a simple thing. We breathe in and out. It'll drop you into your body. It brings you into present moment awareness. And then it also gives you like an outlet. There's also a place for like a release to happen too. So your breath is the most immediate way to come into contact with ourselves. And then meditation and movement and all these other things can be wonderful ways to really support that. If it feels hard to just breathe, there's lots of different ways we can kind of get there. If you're like an athlete, or for some people, maybe you need to start going for a run and it will make you breathe. There's other ways that'll get you to breathe if it's really hard just to sit there and take a few breaths. So movement is another way to just get things moving, literally, and to bring us into connection with our bodies.
So as we start to wrap up today's conversation, what would you say are one or two key takeaways you'd like listeners to leave with today about grief and somatic work?
Well, you don't have to do it alone. And we're not really supposed to, in a sense, right? And grief can be a lonely journey. And in a sense, no one's going to know exactly what you're going through. It is personal. And to come into community and to find a space or allow yourself to have a space where you can be seen, heard, and understood by others, where you can really be witnessing what you're going through, that alone could offer so much support along the way. And then the second piece is to take the gentle steps to practice this work of feeling in your body. And, if yoga is not your thing, that's okay. There's lots of ways to come into somatic awareness. So if you like to go for a walk in the woods, anything that brings you into movement will support you to connect into your body. And to just be gentle with yourself. If it's scary, if it hurts, that's okay. You're human. That is what it is to be human. And to gently in your own time, your own way, just begin to take the steps to feel what is there and then to see how that supports you moving forward.
Thank you so much, Wendy. And if people are interested in connecting with you or working with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
You're welcome to email me. My business's name is the Center for Somatic Grieving, and you can email me at wendy@centerforsomaticgrieving.com, or maybe even better, go to my website. You could check out the different things that I'm doing. I work with people individually as well as lots of group offerings, and that is www.centerforsomaticgrieving.com. Instagram's great too.
Awesome. And I will make sure to have all of those links in the show notes. Wendy, again, this was such a great conversation. Thank you so much for your insights and wisdom and for making space for grief.
Thank you so much for having me, Heather. It's such a pleasure to be with you, and I just loved every moment of it. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, listeners, remember to be kind to yourselves today. You are doing a great job, and we'll see you next time. Take care. That's it for today's episode of Grief is the New Normal. If this conversation resonated with you or you think it might benefit someone else, please share it. Sharing can open doors to healing, understanding, and normalizing these griefy conversations. If you're craving deeper insights or ongoing support, consider signing up for the Grief Gap newsletter. It's packed with resources, tips, and personal stories to help you navigate your grief journey. Visit the website www.griefisthenewnormal.com to subscribe. For those who prefer a more personal touch to their healing process, check out my grief journal, Authentically Unapologetic. It's designed to help you explore your grief on your own terms with prompts and exercises that encourage reflection and growth. I'm Dr. Heather Taylor, and I look forward to our next meaningful conversation. Our soothing tunes are provided by the Datacorns. If you're interested in sharing your story, collaborating, or learning more, please email me at hello@griefisthenewnormal.com. You can also stream the episodes on YouTube for more engaging content. Until next time, keep exploring your grief with intention and support, remembering you don't have to do this alone.